It was going to be somewhere between a 2017 and 74. And when we woke up to the noise and the water out the front, we knew it was going to be significantly worse. The worst recorded flood.
Like nothing we've ever had before.
Keep swimming, mate. Keep swimming. Keep swimming, mate.
Some of the houses around us were getting kind of torn apart. Yeah, it was wild. We thought we were going to die.
Everyone panics and hits the panic button, and I was saying, nah, it's not going to happen, don't worry about it. And unfortunately I was wrong.
And a lot of people didn't believe it. That's why not many people evacuated the houses. This has never happened here before.
Oh my God, this is the worst disaster.
It hits you that there are people literally crying out for your help. Really started to hit me that there are people who may not get out of this.
This is Coraki Fire Station. For 6 days, it became home, an island to 350 people and 250 pets and animals. They were all cramped in a tiny space. There was nowhere else to go and no help coming in or out. The only transport were rowing boats and tinnies that were going to people's houses, emptying fridges, bringing food. A doctor came after 3 days to treat the cuts on people's feet from walking in the water. The people were completely isolated.
When I found out the flood was going to be a major event was probably the Saturday before it flooded, so 2 days before town actually started to flood. Did I have an idea it was going to be that bad? No idea it was going to be anywhere near that. I was expecting something close to what we got in 2017, which floods the lower levels of a few houses and doesn't impact any living space in town. The fire station is a high point in town. It's the high point on the low side of town. So the fire station was sort of completely surrounded by water, no more than 80 metres in each direction.
1 year ago, this intersection of Bridge and Grenfell Streets in Coraki was completely underwater. And it was here, on the first day of the floods, that Fire Captain Russell O'Keefe stood neck deep in water, directing boats to each of the houses along the street, telling them who needed help and where they needed rescue. The worst part was the spiders. Spiders go to high ground. He was covered, huntsmen, all sorts, trying to get to dry land.
In some parts of town, it was extremely fast flowing, so we'll visit one of the streets where the river first flows downtown. That had metre and a half swell going down in rapids, whereas other parts of the town was just calm and there was no flow.
1.5 metre swell.
Yeah.
You can surf that.
You could have surfed it.
At this point, the Richmond and Wilson rivers joined together here at Coraki. It looks completely benign today, but a year ago, they were 8.2.
So the water first flows into town along this intersection from the river, and it usually splits before this intersection and just goes down the two stormwater drains, and that's it. But during the floods, it was over the top of this street sign. We had rapids coming down. You can see damage to the road here. Every house you can see here, apart from this one, got water in its living space. This house was raised just before the floods, but everywhere else got water right through it.
While her husband, the fire chief, Russell O'Keefe, was out in boats rescuing people, Betty was on the phone, taking calls from people, coordinating the effort and telling him where to go and where people needed help.
The phone was ringing and ringing and ringing. And every time he'd come back, I'd be like, somebody's rung. And I was like writing down the phone numbers because I'm not fire and rescue, I shouldn't answer the phones. So I was just writing down phone numbers that were popping up on caller ID and going, these people are ringing, you need to call them back. He ended up saying, look, I'm sorry, I'm busy. You need to answer the phones. So I then just started answering the phones, taking messages, taking notes, running in between agencies. So I'd write down a note, give it to my daughter and say, you've got to run over to the SES, or somebody's looking for this person, can you go up to the evac centre and see if they're there?
The first helicopter bringing any assistance was probably day 3, I believe. We were meant to get food in on day 2 and the helicopters just kept getting retasked elsewhere. So it became an issue trying to get any supplies in and even get people out that needed to be medevaced. Everyone did focus on Lismore at the start, but there are definitely remote communities further out from us who people in Sydney wouldn't even know the name of the town.
On the morning of the flood, Michael Barnes, the chief pilot of Rotary, was ready to spring into action. His first job was to airlift the crew from the Rescue Services helicopter who were stranded and take them to their helicopter so they could start work. He took this helicopter here, landed, almost hovered above the roof of the accommodation where the pilots were, and they walked across the roof and into this helicopter. It was an amazing piece of flying.
It's actually called a hover entry exit because it doesn't involve a full landing, it involves a partial power. In this case, you've got X amount of power in while people are getting into the machine. When another one gets in, you just pull a little bit more power, and the result of that is that you don't put too much weight on the roof.
The 4th biggest disaster in the world happened here, in the Northern Rivers. I'm standing here in my hometown of Lismore. Come on, you know, really, governments have got to cough up. They've got no choice.
We were literally homeless. I was sleeping a lot of nights up at the council chambers on the floor. I know what the government's trying to do, and I appreciate that. When you're dealing in the billions of dollars which is anticipated to be spent on the Northern Rivers, it's taxpayer money. You want to make sure that the money's going to the right spots and where it's needed the most. So you've got to plan and prepare and get all of those procedures and protocols right, which is what is taking the time. And I respect that. And I would rather it take 3 months longer in the planning process to make sure the long-term outcome is the best for the community. But I also understand that people are just fed up and sick and tired of waiting and want to see action. I don't believe the CBD should be looking at relocating. I think the CBD should be embraced and encouraged to grow, to be honest with you. It's going to take a few years, but we've got the commitment and we're determined to safeguard the CBD. But we also, front of mind has to be protecting residents' lives. I never ever want to witness and experience what we did 12 months ago with all of those people just desperate to be saved.
Are people still traumatised? Definitely there's a large number of the community that just get extremely anxious when it rains. I know for the first few months people would get extremely upset just from hearing the sound of even soft rain on their roof. It was a strange feeling, but I think everybody knew that we'd be okay and that we had what we needed to get by. But yeah, it was definitely an odd feeling knowing that help wasn't just a phone call away. We don't expect that in the modern world. You always think you can just pick up a phone and even ring 000 and you're going to have an ambulance show up, and that's not the case.
Are you worried that it'll happen again?
Not really. It's been a long time. It's never happened there, and that was a massive amount of rain. I hope it doesn't happen again, but it may. There's not much you can do about it.
I'm quite optimistic for our future. The community I live in, look at what they did in terms of rescue and recovery already.
Definitely a bond amongst a lot of the community from living so closely, going through the same event, a lot of shared loss. Definitely a lot of new friendships have been formed throughout the community, and the community as a whole seems to be a lot stronger for what has happened.
I remember 6, 7, 8-year-old boy. It still brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. He bought me a fruit platter. He bought 6 of them, and I said, look, why don't you go and give it to someone else? And the mum turned around and said, look, he wants to give it to you. People's friendliness and hospitality, people just dropping into the house, oh, do you want a hand to clean up, or stuff like that, was just amazing.
It was honestly a case of everybody who was able and willing just got in and did extraordinary things. Things that a lot of us probably never thought we would have to, or that we would be capable of doing.